Toby, do you remember that episode of The Office where Dwight got everyone chanting?
Dwight? You mean the Blake Hodges of The Office?
Welcome to the Church Gear Podcast, where we pull the tech out of the booth and onto the stage to share the most outlandish stories and hidden wisdom from the tech trenches. And now, here are your hosts.
I'm your host, Blake Hodges, a man who recently went off mic, and I'm here with my co-host who loves being on mic, Toby Walters.
Why would I go off mic when you give me a mic and a platform? I'll just say it on mic.
But you go off mic by going off. It's another way to say like going off script. It's going off mic.
All right. So you went off script, and we're going off script here because I allowed you to do an opener story.
It's very meta.
Yeah.
And we're not just going off mic. I went off on mic.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of like when Dwight got a little bit of power and he was in charge of the office for a day and everything fell apart. So let's see what happens. You going off mic right now about going off mic.
I'm talking about the day that he got everyone chanting at the conference. People loved him.
When he sounded like a Nazi?
That's not important. Nazis are bad kids. But there was a moment that I was at a concert in October, and this was the first moment that I was like, oh, this is why small concerts are special. It's like a 400-seat venue, standing room only.
Yep.
This band has only had 2 or 3 albums out. They're under 2 million monthly listeners on Spotify.
Okay.
Which for reference, Gregory Onizkov has 9 million, and you don't even know who that is, I bet. So that's
I'm
a
just
small
thinking,
artist.
how many CDs have they sold? That's my reference point. So
I couldn't tell you that, but 400-seat venue, and it's my wife's favorite band.
Yeah.
I took the love of my life to go see the love of her life, which is Gracie Lawrence.
Okay.
And their sound guy comes on. And they say at the beginning that their sound guy's name is Mike.
Okay. Mike's on the mic.
Exactly. So he's out there to fix something. And I'm like, Mike.
So is this in the middle of the show or before?
Middle of the show.
Okay.
Well, because they're kind of jazzy. It's not like this needs to be pristine and perfect. Everyone's moving around. Mike comes on to fix something. And they say oh, give it up for Mike. Well, then near the end of the show, Mike has to come back out again.
Okay.
And I just start going, Mike, 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 Mike.
You started the chant.
And I lock eyes with the bass player, and he nods at me. He goes, Mike, Mike. And everyone starts going, Mike, Mike, Mike. And then Mike does a little, and a little dance. And then everyone stops and applauds, and he goes off. And I was like, I did the ultimate church tech advocate job of Church Gear. I got everyone to celebrate the tech guy. Now he's probably internally like, Blake, why are you drawing attention to me? I'm trying to fix something.
Now, so a few clarifying questions. First of all, was he wearing all black?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Good tech. Secondly, you're totally embarrassing the dude because now he's on stage and you're drawing attention to him and he's trying to blend in without being drawn attention to.
You know how they say don't love people how you want to be loved? Love them how they want to be loved? Well, I just want to be loved with attention, so I gave it to him.
Oh, I know, because I can't even count the amount of times you've tried the Blake chant here at Church Gear. Blake. All of us turn and we're like, we know it's you, Blake.
I have never done that.
So my version of that, and I appreciate this about myself. I'm going to put myself on my little trophy stand right now. But do you often get frustrated at church when it's the end of the worship song and you're like, do we clap? Is this the song we clap or do we not?
Are we doing hot takes? I hate that we clap at the end of songs at church. Okay. I don't like it.
What if they're doing the big Hollywood ending?
Nope. This isn't a performance.
All right. So as a former worship leader myself, it's so awkward because there's half the room that's thinking, should we clap? And the other half hoping we don't. And then there are certain songs where it feels like we should clap, but then I'm not going to be the one to start it. And then there are other songs that feel like, oh, we're just going to let the Spirit breathe here. Now, I have taken it upon myself at church to be the one who helps the worship leader out and starts clapping when it's obvious that we should. And then, obviously I don't clap when it's not, but I have started many claps after the appropriate worship song at church.
You're really helping that person feel like a star, Toby. You're feeding their ego, their sinful ego.
No, I'm just helping them because I've been them not feel awkward on stage. Because we just did a big upbeat song and the ending was the Hollywood ending with the crashing cymbals. And then everybody just stands here and stares at you. That's super awkward.
What I think in your psychology that I'm seeing, Toby, is you don't like silence.
No, I do not. I feel it. As do you, Blake. Go ahead and fill the silence with your intro.
Don't put the mirror onto me. But let's put the mirror onto someone else. Introducing the front of house and system engineer for NF's Hope Tour and Tommy Prophet's Birth of a King Christmas Experience, Travis Stoker. Travis, welcome to the Church Gear Podcast presented by House Right. We're glad to have you with us, man.
Yeah, glad to be here with you guys.
All right, Travis, how would you have felt if you're running up on stage, in the middle of an NF show to fix something, and then the crowd starts chanting, Travis, Travis?
I'm immediately going to turn red and going to try to look away from everything that's happening out there. I'm not going to love that.
Yeah, way to go, Blake.
That is the worst place for me to be.
This is a tale as old as time. I try to do something really awesome for someone, and then I make their life horrible. It's like that time, I'm not going to say this girl's name. I thought it would be nice to say, oh, you don't even look pregnant. I thought that was like a compliment.
Yeah.
I got that's like a top 10. I got in trouble. My wife's an Enneagram 9. She wore me out after that. So I don't say anything nice to pregnant women ever. I can't encourage them. However they go, that's how they go.
They could be 8 months and 3.5 weeks, and I won't say anything until somebody else says something.
Oh, yeah.
That is just a very dangerous thing because, as Travis, you're smarter than we are. You would never say something like that.
I've definitely put my foot in my mouth before with things like that. So
Blake occasionally takes his foot out of his mouth. That's the difference.
It's tasty. We put hot sauce on it. So Travis, give us the hot sauce of your production background, man. What's been the hot beats that have led you up to this moment hanging out with us?
Yeah, man. Grew up in church. I started volunteering as a kid pretty early on. My dad was a musician, so I was always around the worship team and stuff like that. So grew up playing drums, and eventually that kind of led me to volunteering in media production. So started at a young age, did that all the way through high school and a bit of college, and then started working with a local production company out of Atlanta, and eventually got the opportunity to tour, just meeting mutual friends through that and stuff like that. So started touring 15 years ago, and it's been a long journey all through that. It's such a big community, but small community at the same time. It's crazy how connections I had made, 5-10 years ago come back around, and I end up doing another gig just from that connection. So it's been quite a journey doing that.
How old were you when you started touring?
Yeah,
were you 18?
He's 26 right now.
I was 19, so I started touring in 2011. So. Really young age. I dropped out of college, so I really wanted to be on the road. That was kind of my end goal in some way or another. And I worked through all kinds of different roles. So I've done about every role you can imagine on the road. Backline tech, drum tech, mixed monitors. I was a lighting director for a number of years. And started working at front of house, and that's where I really found the passion for live production. Was front of house. It kind of satisfied the musician side of myself. It was between that and lighting directing, because being a drummer as well, lighting, especially running a manual show that's not time coded and stuff like that, it really satisfied the drummer side of myself. So, but ultimately, I really enjoy mixing front of house. I love it. So, it's that's kind of where I landed with all of it.
Toby, at what point do we do a bingo card that we send out to all of our listeners? Because dropped out of college, did a bunch of different things on tour.
Yeah.
I'm missing one that I had in my head when he was saying,
I got it.
It's all the bingos.
Yep.
Oh, started volunteering when he was young.
Yeah. Started at church, learned at church, started when he was young. Yep. All the boxes. He checks all the boxes. He's a total heartthrob. Well, Blake, we got to mention heartthrob. So you and I both are huge NF fans. You want to geek out for just a second here? Give our audience a little perspective of how you feel about
this. Is too vulnerable and revealing.
Mr. F.
I've basically been listening to his song Hope the past 2 years in my running journey, because when I am Travis, I was like 236 pounds. I've come down some from there, but
you're like 231 now.
Yeah, something like that. And so I would just listen to Hope, and I was like, oh my gosh, he literally wrote every single word of this song about me. I shouldn't say this live because it's probably not a copyright thing. I'm going to print it out and put it in my house somewhere. I love that song. Every time when I'm running, I imagine when I finally hit my goal of 50 pounds, I'm going to make a reel and I'm going to use the last 44 seconds of that song. It's just, man, it is so good.
A few years ago, I went to a concert at Bridgestone Arena, and I won't say the band because it wasn't a great experience. It was the first night out on their tour, but the systems designer didn't have it dialed in that night. And I was sitting in kind of the upper bowl area. And so I was just wondering, like, did they not deploy PA for the upper seats? Because it was just a really bad experience. And then I knew 2 weeks later, I was taking my son Titus to his first concert, which was NF, back at Bridgestone. And we were sitting in the upper bowl again. And I'm like, man, is this not going to be an awesome experience? And it was awesome. And I was like, thank God that, the system designer, which apparently is Travis.
Wait a minute. Were you doing that show, Travis?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was also there. I was in the top left and you were in the middle right or the middle
top. Yeah.
That's so funny.
I know.
This is the first time this has ever happened in over 200 episodes. We were both at someone's show.
Probably.
Has to be.
Yeah. So, Travis, one of the things I say laugh, but it really makes me cringe. The comments on the internet, they talk about, mixing rap artists and they say, oh, that's easy. You got a vocal and you got a bunch of tracks. Like there's no job to it. So talk to us about just mixing an NF show. What is it like? Like how many inputs?
Yeah.
What's your job like to do that?
Yeah, it's so funny. I get the same thing of like, oh, how hard could mixing a rap artist be? And a lot of people think it's even simpler than, multiple tracks, like stemmed out tracks. A lot of people think it's just a left, right, or a DJ situation, and then a couple vocals. And, most of the projects I work on with rappers, it's very much not that. We're running, 32 channels of playback, multiple stereo stems. So it's really nice. And with NF, we have the element of having a live drummer on stage as well. So with the drums itself, and it's so funny. I got a lot of lashback on another video I did talking about this. We have a lot of drum inputs, and that's just because of the size of the drum kit itself. It's a lot of drums up there. So multiple toms, gong drum. We do triggers as well. Samples from an SPDSX. So, just in drum world alone, we were pushing close to 30 inputs with drums, and then another. As far as inputs go that the audience would hear out front, we're looking at like 26 inputs of stems. So it's more than a lot of people would imagine. And, ultimately having that control and tracks and playback, it allows us to, shape the sound to make it optimized for the PA that we're carrying on the tour. So, and that's one of the big reasons too, like we were talking about the system design a bit. I always, when I build out a tour, I look at all the different variables of like, what do I need to make this the same experience for everyone across the room? And I work really closely with our vendors and the systems engineer I'll have on the tour with me as well, and give them, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Let's run with this. And, I'll lean on the vendors to give their kind of legacy knowledge and wisdom into that. Like, hey, let's try this. I think this is what you're going for. And, we'll try different things. I've done all kinds of crazy things, especially, on an arena tour like that. It's such a large PA. You're fighting a lot of physics, and in a space that's very unforgiving, with the reflections and stuff like that. So, kind of jumping back to tracks, having the ability to have all your different sources from tracks split out into, 12, 13, 14 different stereo stems gives us a lot of control in how we balance that in the room and kind of shape that tonally inside of a room that's very unforgiving. Yeah. With a PA that is also, it's a massive PA. So
what was your setup on the Hope tour with front of house and PA?
So with the PA, I moved over to L Acoustics back in 2021 on the Clouds tour. I love L Acoustics. They make some great products, and they've been super supporting and what we've been doing, and very helpful when I have ideas that I bring to the table, and they say, hey, let's try this. Like, this is what I think would work for you. So, that tour we had K1 over K2 for mains, K2 sides, flown KS28 subs, and then KS28 subs on the ground with, we did 2 different versions of front fills. The second cycle of the Hope Tour, we actually landed on K2 front fills, which seems crazy, but it honestly worked really well.
Yeah.
We just had to turn them down quite a bit, but so we're not ripping people's faces off in the front row, but the voicing character, worked way better for what we were trying to do down front to keep that energy up down front. We had Karas on the first iteration, and we just weren't happy with where we were on that. And so I think it was Arctic Monkeys was carrying K2s as front fills. I was like, I'm going to try that. Yeah. So how could that not give me what I want? Everything else is K1 and K2 in the air. So, there were several shows on that tour that we actually had. It wasn't a full 270 deployment. And what I mean by that is we sold seats past the downstage line. Mm-hmm. So we actually went past like Monitor World with sold seats. So we actually had, it'd be your main hang, the side hang, and then there was another hang on the outside of the side hang that we called our 270 rig, and that was more K2 as well. So Nashville, we actually had that deployment too. So that's a lot of energy up in the air that we're trying to control and navigate that. So
nice. What was your front of house console?
Yeah, so been with Digico on NF since I think I started carrying it back in 2019. Love Digico. Mm-hmm. Try to use it on every project I do now. It's it can basically do anything I want it to do, which is what I always look for. It's super programmable. We've run lots of snapshots for the show. We actually time code the consoles as well, which is really nice. I have snapshots automated, so it's super helpful as far as like flexibility with what I can do with the console too. All the different formats. We're taking in MADI, we're taking in analog, being able to record out of the console for virtual sound checking. It just does everything I need it to. And just the Digico ecosystem with their different accessories and racks and stuff like that makes it super easy to achieve all that. Plus, we got onto quantum consoles. So I toured Waves for a while, and I got away from actually using Waves for a few tours. Mm-hmm. And went to just strictly what was native in the desk and kind of built my file around that, and not burying myself in Waves plugins, but rather using a bit of outboard gear, mostly Rupert Neve stuff, mm-hmm. Occasionally a couple of API pieces, and some Bricasti reverb units. Yeah, I've gone as wild as doing one tour. I think it was the Clouds tour. I had a TC Electronic. The System 6000 effects unit with like the big controller on the side, which was really fun to have. But I've gradually brought plugins back into the mix. But just it's been minor, like maybe 12 different signal chains of plugins. So, and that's mostly been like running effects to run, the same reverbs that were used on the albums and stuff like that. Using some things that I really know and love while utilizing the processing natively on the quantum console, and the new quantum, like the mustard processing, the spice rack. Really love using that stuff, and having it internally in the console is always easier to program. It's one less point of failure too. So nice. That's kind of where I've been at with that. I started using the Transform engine recently on a few other projects. Used it with Tommy this past year, and it was a massive upgrade for that. Love using the Transform engine and everything you can do with that. The VST host is kind of the direction I started moving to. I tried a Live Professor for a bit on the Hope run, and then eventually moved over to Super Rack Performer, just so I could run other VST3 plugins outside of the Waves ecosystem with Waves plugins as well. Okay. And then when Transform came out, I said, I got to have that. It integrates with the Digicos. You get the plugin GUI on the screen on the Digico, and you actually control plugins. You can program them into snapshots. it just made it really easy and was kind of a no-brainer, especially with the redundancy built into that system. So
love it. Blake, those commercials during football season where Bradley Cooper's saying football is trying to sell you food?
Food!
Yeah. So now I'm thinking Digico has jumped onto this train with their mustard processing and their spice rack. And I'm sure you can make gooey sound like food as well. So even you can start to think, maybe I should get a Digico.
Yeah. I mean, if it's going to bring me my sound and my burger, that sounds like a great time.
Travis, a lot of your NF show, and I'm sure you do it a lot with Tommy as well. Tracks and timecode, I'm assuming, are essential. Talk to us about the realities of using those things, and then bring them into the context of a church. Because technically, if you think about it, like a single worship leader could have an NF level experience if you're starting to think in tracks and timecode, timecoding the lights and the video elements. But there's pros and cons to everything. So give us some of your jump up on your hot take seat. What is that, Blake? You stand on a soapbox, but you give a hot take. How does that work?
Well, the squatty potty. So you sit in the hot seat and then you give your hot take.
I know. I have a squatty
out
potty.
the back door by putting your feet on the soapbox. All right, Travis, can you produce us a hot take? We're going to test your stool later for scientific purposes.
Yeah, timecode is one of the most important things on an NF production. It ties everything together. We have so many moving pieces, and we utilize it a bit more than just devices reading timecode. Sometimes we have a timecode reader at like a stage manager's position, or even like our set carpenters. They have timecode readers as well, and we utilize that to basically execute different cues through the show too. So if something's moving on stage, like a physical prop or something like that, we do timecode readers, as well as a lot of our set carps and crew. Actually, most of our crew, they're on ears as well. So crew that normally wouldn't be, you always see backline techs, drum techs, monitor techs, all those guys are going to be on ears. But our production manager, everyone is on ears. And the reason why we use like a slate, a guide track that we have. So the guys on stage that are performing, they have a guide track, each their own guide track coming from playback to cue them however they feel where they need to cue. We can build that into playback, but the crew has their own guide track as well. So we have automated set pieces. We have lifts in the stage, so there'll be moments that that stuff, there's no way to time code those devices. They're just, it's literally just a switch to move something up and down. So they need a way to execute that the same way every single night. So utilizing timecode readers, the crew guide, we're able to execute those cues consistently every single night. And then the same goes with lighting, video, special effects. We time code all that stuff as well as monitors and in front of house for time coding snapshots. So it just creates for a consistent experience every night and allows us to stay in harmony together, pulling off these shows. So
yeah,
if
as far as if
one of us on this podcast was an idiot, I'm not saying who out of the three of us, but if one of us had no idea what time coding meant and we were going to say it in layman's terms, what is the thing that time coding gives us? What is the benefit?
It's basically a running clock that, there's all kinds of different formats of it, but it's essentially a clock you can sync everything to. So, I'll assign a song essentially a time code hour. So it'll be like hour 1, minute 15, and then it starts at second 0. And basically when we fire a song, every single device will see that hour 1, minute 15. And, we timestamp cues onto, the software that, we're programming these devices to. So when it sees that time roll past, it'll execute that cue. So it's basically like a digital signal. It's used a lot in video as well, in a different way than what we're using it, but just for like gen locking and stuff like that. Not gen locking, but clock syncing and stuff like that. So
it helps you pull off
together.
It helps you pull off the whole production in a automated synced way. But I'm guessing that it's pretty bad if you got off time. Like if NF went too fast or too slow, like he's got to stay on time.
Well, the click track would then be synced to the clock, which I'd assume he has a click in his ears or something.
Yeah. So, everything relies on playback, and that is like the biggest key. And, I do a lot of playback design now. A guy that used to work with us on NF had built this great playback rig for us. And we, it's utilizing digital and MADI outputs, and then we have analog redundancy to that. But the playback rig itself has redundancy built in. There's basically two different laptops. So if one side fails, it kicks over to the other side, and it's inaudible when it happens. And it'll basically kick over to a whole nother session of Ableton if that first laptop fails, and vice versa. It can go either way. So when that happens, if we lose playback, then we lose the entire show. There's no way to do the show without it. So we have to go to the backup option, which is playing something from another laptop or another device just to get through the show. But, fortunately we've never had anything critical like that happen. So, but there's lots of redundancy there. And, fortunately, I think one time we've had to kick over, and that's another great thing with the Digico consoles. At one point we had an analog playback rig, and, we wanted to get rid of that conversion going from D to A, and then back A to D into the Digico side of things. We decided to go to the MADI route and keep everything digital all the way through until we got to our desk, and then we can process it and do what we want to there. I think we've had one or two times that MADI has given us an issue where something unsyncs, or we get clock slippage on word clock or something like that. But that's really rare. But again, with the Digico, we were able to build macros, and it's one button push and we can kick over to our analog sources from the playback rig. So it's been super useful having that, and
Blake, there's going to be a test on all of this after the episode for you.
Whenever Maddie gives me an issue, I just talk to a different tech in our tech lab. We do have a tech named Maddie. I just, I talk to someone else.
Yeah. And then sometimes Maddie works on Maddie. That's the funnest, day here at Church Gear.
Two negatives do make a positive. So does Maddie working on Maddie become Trevor?
Wow.
Get us back on the rails, Toby.
All right, Travis. So before you're so rudely interrupted by Blake, talk to us about tracks and playback and timecode in church. If you have any opinions or thoughts on how churches can maybe use that to their advantage.
Yeah, I still work with a couple of churches here in Atlanta, and I've done both with churches. Timecode you see less, and your normal Sunday service. I know of people that do it just again for the consistency's sake, but it's nothing to see. Several stems of tracks coming back to the engineers on a normal Sunday service. So I really like having tracks because, it's always that kind of mixed sweetener, kind of helps fill things out if you need to. It's also, you always have the variable, like you're doing it every week, somebody can be sick the day of a Sunday. So it's kind of massive to be able to still have like, hey, our guitarist is sick. I need to put this back in the tracks and have that in there. So, you can have things like that. Drums is a little harder to fill, Yeah. I don't think I've ever had that kind of situation, but, I really like having tracks in the church world, and it can add a lot to the mix, but you have to use it tastefully too. Like you can't overdo it. You still want to use what's on stage. Otherwise you're like, where's this horn player on stage, or where's this organ player on stage?
Yeah.
Just, using it tastefully and blending it. A big thing with, your sources on stage and tracks is, just making sure tonally they sound similar too, because you can have it sounding like it's in, like the sources on stage are in one space and your tracks are in a completely different space. So trying to balance that as well. Excuse me.
Yeah, have you seen churches kind of get themselves into trouble using tracks as well? Do you have a kind of a certain level of talent on your stage in order to, play along with the tracks and not make it get really weird?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have to have, obviously a rock solid drummer with the click track and everything. Mm-hmm. Also, you see a lot of MDs on stage in churches now too, music directors that are, they're controlling where you're at in an Ableton session live, that's a unique one. Like I've never had to deal with that in touring or the live shows I do, because we just do the same thing night in, night out. We're not jumping through different places of the songs, but you're in the moment. In a church service, you might want to go back to a bridge moment in a song or, something like that. So that's a whole nother variable. And I have a lot of respect for guys. Specifically, like there was one guy I was watching a video of a while back. He does playback for Passion conferences. Dan Alber, I think is his name. And he was talking about a story of having to jump around on an Ableton session in a stadium full of people and not have this go awry. Yeah. So, sorry, excuse me. You definitely have to have a solid understanding of how it works and how it integrates, but also just, I think, practice makes perfect. So if you have to rehearse with these things, mm-hmm. To go successfully. I
wonder if
the timecode aspect. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
I was thinking about tracks, and I wonder if any churches have tried yet. I'm not recommending this, but I'm also saying maybe say your level of talent is not quite there yet. Like maybe you have a great bass player and a great singer, and you're struggling with finding really good guitar players or drummers, but you have people that are willing, give it a shot. Is there a world in which your drummer could be playing an electric set and your guitar player could be playing through a Kemper, yet it's actually tracks that people are hearing? And so you're telling them, it's all about the worship you're portraying. You want to play simple things. You don't want to get, you got to practice still, but the front of house mixer can say actually the tracks are what's in the mix. And, you might be seeing them on stage. If you kind of pay attention, you'll see they're not playing the exact same things. But for most people out in the audience, they're just thinking, oh, this is a good experience.
Yeah, I've seen something like that before, but I feel like that's more rare as far as, just completely replacing mm-hmm. musicians on stage with tracks. Besides, unfortunately, I think guitarists get the most of that because it's the guitar tone's not that great. I think I'm going to use more of what's in the track. But, mm-hmm. As far as drummers and vocalists and stuff like that, you don't see that quite as much. Bass players get it too. Unfortunately, it's always the guitar. So
because it's also really
there's not even a bass player on stage, and I'm hearing bass guitar right now. What's going on?
It's easier to trick the mind to switch over from the guitars and basses into tracks because most people are not going to know the difference.
No, not at all. Yeah. So whereas you can see a drummer hitting drums and it's like, wait a second, something's not quite right here. Yeah. So I don't think I've ever seen. I've been in a service where I've seen someone running tracks and there was full drums within the tracks and the drummer was playing along to it, which, that's a whole nother situation. It gets real flammy and stuff like that. So, but that was a one-time thing. So,
and go back to Timecode now. Talk to us about Timecode in church.
Yeah. So, Timecode in church, where I see it the most is, your special events and throughout the year. That's where I see Timecode utilized. It's always like Easter or Christmas services mm-hmm. Where you have a big kind of production opening or something like that, where you're seeing time-coded intros and stuff like that. That's where I see it the most. As far as week to week, there's a few churches here in Atlanta that I know that do that, and they time code everything, and just for that consistency factor. And I'm sure there's other churches all around that do this as well. But if you have the ability to do it for the consistency's sake, I think it's great. But I also think it's a big workload to do that when you can program cues. And this is coming from the lighting director side of myself, of like you can manually fire things still, and it's a lot less of a workload for multiple departments, because you're not having to put timecode tracks into the session and then giving them a file striped with timecode to program to every week. So, there's a lot more steps in that with timecoding lighting and video and stuff like that, week to week. So that can add a lot to the workload. Whereas you can just have, you can really lean on volunteers that, want to be a part of, keeping people engaged in these worship services and stuff like that. And they want to push the buttons. So let them push the buttons.
Yeah.
So I think timecode can kind of take away from that. So, it has its uses and can be very useful when you're tying a lot of things together. So,
yeah. And I assume it makes a lot more sense when you're touring, because you're doing the same show over and over every night in different cities, as opposed to Sunday morning experience is going to be different every week.
Yeah. And the other tough thing, kind of going back to, you don't want to, a lot of cases, I don't think you want to necessarily tie yourself to one arrangement of a song. So like, if you start wanting to jump around within a song because you're feeling that moment in the service, don't time code it. Leave it to where you can be in the moment with it and go with those changes as you feel it. So,
yeah. Love that. I'm going to use an analogy now. So like a race car driver is an amazing driver, but the best race car drivers probably know a decent amount about how the car is built and car design, engine design. And so I want to relate that back to an audio engineer. If you think of yourself as a race car driver, any audio engineer, how much should or does an audio engineer need to understand about system design in order to be better at their job?
Man, that is so funny you use that analogy. I'm like one of the biggest racing fans. I love cars.
We do our research, Travis.
You're a Georgia redneck.
We check your social profiles. We call all of your closest relatives.
Yeah, your social security number, your bank account.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's good. I'm a lot of success I've had with different shows has been through being able to build the systems around what I need it to do, like I was kind of mentioning earlier. So, the systems design aspect, I started doing a lot of that 5 or 6 years ago, of like, hey, I really need to control the variables with the PA specifically. That was the big one of and it kind of goes back to, it's just a rapper, how complicated can this show be? Or it's just this show, how many subs could you possibly need? What size PA could you possibly need for this? And it's like, no, I need to keep the consistency there. And the deployment very similar, because with as much energy as we have in these rooms with that PA, and on stage, it can change. The different size systems can change things drastically, and the experience for the guys on stage as well. So, designing something that we can keep that consistency is the big key here. Keeping it consistent for them night to night as much as possible, as much as the room allows. I mean, you're going to fight physics to an extent. And you're going to have different size rooms. You're going to have, most arenas we're going into, we can get the desired height of the PA that we want to, but sometimes we go into a smaller arena where the PA is 10 feet, 15 feet lower. And, a lot of times we'll scale the PA, but sometimes we're not able to. And sometimes it's just a lower room. Like a good example is the Forum in LA. That's a very low trim height room. And, when you bring the PA that much closer to the ground, you're feeling the energy off of that PA. So it changes the experience on stage. And we have stage side fills. We have, it's its own small PA in it. On stage, it's 4K2 over 2K28s per side. So it is a bumping stage with wedges as well. So, the physics there, all of that stuff is interacting together. So there's a lot of thought that goes into how the front of house PA and all of the stage PA interacts to give them a consistent experience on stage, as well as maintaining the good experience out front for the crowd too. Yeah.
I mean, how many times do you step into a church and you're going to mix front of house and you're struggling to get the mix you want out of it, and you think, because the system design is just wonky in this room?
That does happen for sure. A lot of times what I have to do, and it was funny during COVID, I went into a lot of different churches and helped them out. While I had the time, I was at home a lot more, obviously. And I tried to help and teach as much as I could, retuning systems where I could. And just kind of explaining, like, one of the biggest things I see, and, everybody has an opinion on this, and I always see it in churches, but it's subs on aux, and I got away from that a while back. Everything is a left-right mix, and it's to maintain your time alignment, because when you EQ is time, you're going to start shifting things out of alignment. If you're EQing something on a channel strip that's feeding an aux, whereas you're doing different processing on, your master left-right. That matters a lot more on the larger PAs, where, especially like, L Acoustics, most of their boxes, even like the medium formats, go down to 60 hertz as far as the crossover range. So, making sure that your subs and your main PA are working in harmony together and not out of alignment, that can be a big thing. And then, it's, I was listening, I think it was actually Matt. I was listening to some of the other podcasts just to kind of get familiar with the podcast doing today, talking about, having integration companies come in, or just someone come in to retune your system every so often is super beneficial, because components go bad over time. A lot of times you might have components out in your PA that need, repair or something like that, or just, room changes, stuff like that. It's always good to get your system checked up over once a year, twice a year.
And how much should the average church tech learn about system design, room tuning, all that stuff? Because, I mean, that's a completely different, Blake, don't you hate it? No, you love it when my brain farts. But I hate it when my discipline. That's the word I was looking for. A completely different discipline. You can get, way down into the physics and the acoustics and all those properties. But I think there's some level you should understand if you're going to be a front of house engineer. How much should you learn, and how do you learn those things?
I think, most systems nowadays, you have ways to do like load checking and stuff on your PAs and stuff like that, making sure all the components are working properly. Mm-hmm. But also, there's super useful tools like Smart and stuff like that, to where you can listen with an RTA mic, and there's plenty of resources to learn Smart and do like the courses and stuff like that can say, hey, there's something not right here. I think it's time to give, the installer and integration specialist a call to come in, or just someone to come in and tune the system, or check it out at least, and move with the next steps from there. Yeah. So, Smart's a very valuable tool. So I love having Smart and being able to use that to identify problems and then go from there.
Yeah. Now, mixing rap, I assume subs are essential to your mix. Give us a little insight into, some of your personal sub strategy, and then how can a church steal some of that concept without, blowing grandma's hair away?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the big things, with K1s are a big box. They're, it's 15-inch low frequency drivers in each box, or 2 in each box rather. And the K1s can go down to 30 hertz easily. So, you have a lot of power left and right there. Just with that, and then you do flown subs left and right as well. You start creating power alleys and stuff like that, and you get lobing and these weird null areas, and that stuff gets really hard to control. So that's where kind of the ground sub array comes in. Your placement is everything. Obviously you want to get it within a certain wavelength and distance to work together, so that you have less destructive interference, using it to delay arc and spread that energy to where you don't have those really hot zones and stuff like that. And it's always funny. I always still with these systems, as much as I do, I still get pummeled at front of house. It's everyone down center is going to get the most sub energy for sure. There's no way around it, but there's a lot of ways to mitigate it with doing delay arcing. And I actually tried, last year. I had a very similar rig. It was a bit smaller than what we would normally have on NF, but it was still a K1 rig with KS28s. It was a Disney tour I was doing. And, we did, it's like this push-pull method. Oh man, I wish I could remember the name of it. I should have looked this up in my notes. But essentially, like, you are pushing frequencies at every octave and pulling them every octave by like 8 dB, but it's mirrored on each side. And this actually came from the systems engineer I was working with on that tour. He's like, "Hey, my buddy's actually doing this on." I think it was somebody on 9 Inch Nails or someone else was basically employing the same method, and they were having success with it. And I was like, yeah, let's try it. Like, we're having a big power rally. The biggest thing that kills us with these designs is it's hard to get the spacing right with the center 2 subs on the ground, and then you have the left right as well to get the spacing right because of a thrust going right down the center. All the shows I seem to do now have thrusts right down the center, and they're always 8 feet wide, 16 feet wide, and that's well outside of the your optimal spacing between sub sources. And we tried this, and it worked. It actually, it kind of spread the energy a bit, and it's really wonky thinking about it and looking at the EQ because it's real tight cues where you're doing it. But we did it across the flown subs first, then we did it on the ground subs, left and right, these opposite EQs where you're pushing and pulling an octave from basically 30 hertz all the way up to, I think it was 60 hertz or 80 hertz. And then we eventually did it across the entire system, the K1s as well. And it's just in that frequency range, and it helps spread that energy out a lot to where you didn't have the lobbing as much. And it was kind of funny. We were able to kind of get it to represent in sound vision a little bit too, which is the SPL prediction software Acoustics has, and say, hey, this is what we're doing, and kind of tweak it from there. And it spread that low frequency energy out quite a bit. And we got rid of, the power outlet was still there a bit, but the nulls weren't as bad. Up, the center of the room wasn't quite as hot anymore as well. So, trying different things like that. I always like experimenting and seeing what we can do, playing with cardioid patterns and stuff like that, and fire arrays. Yeah. Seeing where I can get with it. It was funny. I was really bummed I wasn't able to do it. The Tommy Prophet show this past year in Bridgestone Arena, I initially had it in the design. I was going to do a flown center sub and fire array above the stage, and it was crazy looking. It was 18 DMB SL subs that were all going to hang off of truss, and it was going to be this crazy in-fire array up there. And the SPL prediction looked amazing. Like, I was getting good cardio rejection off the backside of it, because we have a full orchestra on that show, so there's 100 something inputs on that show. So keeping the sources nice and clean on stage is critical. So and unfortunately, we weren't able to do it, but just the rigging and stuff, and the time, it was really the time frame didn't allow for us to do it, because we load the show in the morning of that show, and it's a 1-day show, and all this stuff is coming together for the second time after being in a rehearsal space. So we went with putting all the subs. We did flown subs left and right, and then a ground sub array as well. But trying different things like that, you can really help yourself. And that, sub placements is the biggest key to that. And especially in a sub array, left and right, low frequency energy is always going to be tough to control because of the way the physics interact. You get the destructive interference, the cancellation, and then you get the summing, where it just gets really hot in the center. So, working with integrations companies, you just have to convey those needs, and having them, design a system, placing subs, looking at SPL maps and stuff like that of like, hey, I think this is how this is going to react. This is how I'm not going to destroy the front row or the center of the room or, the back sides or corners.
Yeah.
is a big part of it. So
I think the nice thing about churches is, especially now in the digital age, you can use virtual sound check during the week. You can try some of these experimental things. You can, I would repeat what he said, but I didn't understand half of what he said. Blake, you understood zero of what he said, but these smart engineers that are listening to this are thinking, oh, that's a really interesting idea. Let me try that on a Tuesday afternoon, walk the room, see what it's doing. And if it doesn't, just go back to what you had. Like, digital recall is an amazing thing because you're not going to redeploy the PA yourself. But just that advantage that you're in the same room every week, you can try different things and then just put it back if it doesn't work. So I love the experimental spirit, Blake.
I'm just trying to understand if Travis is going to get attacked in this episode because it looks like a Canadian hockey player is sitting behind him. What is the red blob behind you, bro?
That's his chair.
That's your chair? I've been staring at this whole time. Like, what on earth is this red blob? All right, well,
you're a little slow, but that's
the only question I had.
Yeah, you want to, try and squeeze a disaster story or 50 out of him? Because NF is your...
Well, I don't want to hear any NF disasters.
Wow.
Travis, do you have anything where everything went wrong? How did you address it with leadership or the artist? Give us the deets, man.
I got two different stories. I'll give you two different stories. One being, we were doing... it was the Hope Tours in Europe. We were doing a venue in Scotland over in Europe. And we went into this theater, and this tour was, that leg of the Hope run was so interesting because when we got to Europe, we were doing arenas, but we were also going into these smaller venues. And we got into the room and saw the stage size and said, there is no way we're fitting everything up here today. Like it got to the point of like, Monitor World is not going to fit up here today. And we started having to pivot and figure out how do we get like signal back to all of our amplifiers and stuff like that, and just our stage inputs, because our monitor package and like our whole control package, everything's loomed out. It's all labeled, and it's built to be efficient and plug and patch quickly. So we're like, how do we get everything? Like, we're going to put front of house or monitors at front of house at this point, and playback as well, which we ultimately ended up doing. But we had to get all the drum inputs back from stage, which is 30 inputs. And we didn't have any of the gear there to do that. And all this stuff is, it's multi-pin connections. It was all LK37 connections. So the venue had some in a panel. They actually had an LK37 box there. And we go to patch it, and everything's like showing up in weird spaces. Apparently there's like 7 different types of LK37 pinouts that you can make on these panels. And I was like, this is not the right one. Fortunately, we ended up getting something locally in Scotland, and we were I think we're in Glasgow. We were able to get something there and made it work, but it was getting stressful. But we had ground stack side fills, which consisted of, it was 2 J subs and 2 J8s that would sit basically on the downstage left and right corners of the stage. Nothing flown for that tour. We just kept it simple, and it was truck spacing and stuff like that as well. So we're going up the ramp with these side fills, and all of a sudden we just hear this loud break. And this ramp was like the most homemade looking contraption you've ever seen. But it was a metal ramp, like it looked solid. And the weight of the side fills going up the ramp, it just absolutely demolished one of these welds, and the ramp broke apart. So then we're in a holding pattern trying to get the last bit of audio on stage, trying to figure out how to get our inputs back from drums to front of house, where front of house is also like 30, 40 feet wide at this point, just due to my console, my rack, monitors, console, and rack, and then playback all being out there next to lighting as well, for that matter. We were super wide in this theater in front of house. It was so funny. And so they ended up bringing in like a local welder, and fortunately, like the local crew were so kind and friendly. They're like, yeah, we'll get this fixed up for you, in the best Scottish accent you've ever heard in your life. And they're hilarious and just having a great time with it. And didn't even phase them. They got the ramp welded up. We eventually got the massive side fills up there and made a show happen. So,
this gives me the hives as a project manager. I look at all these spreadsheets that I make for the whole year, and I'm like, if everything goes perfect, it'll be fine.
Yeah, it's like, Blake, if you had to do Philo, but 50 times in different venues every time.
I would die.
Yeah.
All right, give us your second one, Travis.
Yeah, the second one, this was a really tough one. It was the first year we did. It was the second year of Tommy Prophet, Birth of a King, the live concert, and it was the first year we did it in Grand Ole Opry. And we'd done rehearsals. There's a sound stage on the backside of the Grand Ole Opry, and so we did rehearsals in there. But I didn't have a full PA. I just had like reference, like near fields and stuff to mix down with everything with the orchestra and whatnot. And we moved over to the Grand Ole Opry the day of show and get everything loaded in, virtual sound checked a bit, and I got it feeling really good. Everything was feeling great. We got a bit of time to run things with the orchestra and all the artists and stuff like that the day of show. And we go in to do one of the first or second song. And I was on an SD7. I was on a Quantum 7 for this. And I don't mix on those a lot. Like the 338 or SD5 has been, or Quantum 5 has been my bread and butter, just as far as like the layout of everything. Mm-hmm. And there's an extra bank of faders on the top of the SD7, and we start one of the songs. And I had programmed, when I mixed things down from virtual sound check, I'd programmed like the piano to be quite a bit hotter. And at this point, we were still using an acoustic grand for this. And Tommy wants these shows like really pumping, feeling big, not crazy loud, but he wants it to feel good. And they, talking with him, he wanted more piano in this specific song. So I had it, when I went to fire the snapshot at the top of the song, something just starts feeding back like crazy. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this? And at this point, I hadn't pushed any of this loud in the room. Top of the show, you get bodies in the room, it sucks up some of the energy. So I'll push the PA a dB or two more than what I normally would. And with the Grand Ole Opry too, you don't have, like, they basically hand you drive lines to drive the PA, and you can ask to make a change to the PA, and they're like, no, it's all locked out. Like, you can't make a change to anything. So it's just basically, the system processor I had with the EQ and stuff that I can make some changes and timing stuff like that. But as far as like getting into the granular details, I couldn't make any changes. So song starts, feedback kicks off like crazy. I think it's a vocal mic or something like that immediately. I'm grabbing vocals, I'm grabbing all these different faders, and it's still just going. And I never once think it's the piano, which is on a different fader, on a different bank entirely. And fortunately, it was on the surface of the console, but I just ended up grabbing the master just to get it contained for a second and then bring it back up. And I was just like, it felt like the longest, this is probably in reality 3 to 5 seconds maybe, but it felt like an eternity. And, eventually figured out it was the piano because I looked over the fader. I was like, oh, that fader is much higher than it's ever been for any of the other songs, but we also added more piano. And, we had some DPA 4099s inside of the piano shell, capturing that. And great mics, but inside of a room like that with that much PA, it started. The piano is like right next, it's 8 feet off the downstage edge. So it started catching energy off the backside of the PA, and it was like a low feedback that, stuff I totally want there in the piano, but it was just too much. And now we've since gone to a Nord piano inside of these awesome like grand shells. So that definitely helps a lot, especially in the arena space. So, but yeah, that was a fun one to explain after the show. And it's like, look, man, I'm so sorry. Like, we programmed this, and it's always chaos, those day of shows. Like, it ends up being 16, 17 hour days, if not longer sometimes, just with trying to run through that many rehearsals and stuff like that. So, your brain is tired at that point, but you also have this adrenaline rush from doing the show too. So mistakes are bound to happen. I was like, hey man, I'm sorry this happened. Like, and Tommy's a really cool guy, and he was totally understanding. And we made the right adjustments to do what we wanted to the following years. So.
Yeah. Blake, I'm thinking, going all the way back to your intro story about, shouting out the guy's name.
Mike.
You're actually triggering their worst nightmares, just like Travis just stated.
Crap.
Because, there are those moments when something happens to PA, the entire audience turns around and looks at the front of the house like, what you do, bro? And so, way to go, Blake.
It feels like they always look back at the front of house to they would see literal blood on their hands, like they were back there with a knife killing the PA
it's like the fire alarm went off and they look at front of house. The lights went out, they look at front of house. Like it's always
some guy steals their girlfriend, they look at front of house.
It's always the front of house guy's fault.
Well, in these moments where we just want to find someone to blame, we gotta, say we got to keep the show running. You keep a lot of shows running. Our churches, they go, we got to keep Sundays running. So what would be a piece of advice for you? Travis says you've done so many shows in so many different countries to help our church techs keep Sundays running.
Yeah, team is the biggest thing. Having a good team to rely on, leaning into that team. Especially in the church world too, like having a good volunteer pool to go from and keeping everybody kind of on the same page, but rotating people in and out so they're not getting burned out. That's definitely helpful. But relying on your team. We have a really good team, and it's so funny. Like the team we have for NF, I do all kinds of other different shows. Like I mentioned, and we talked about Time and Profit. It's pretty much the same team that does NF, does Time and Profit, that does Disney, a lot of the Disney shows I do. We work together a lot and we know our strengths and weaknesses. And that's kind of the genius behind our production manager, good friend of mine, Chris Denholm. He's very good at piecing these crews together. And I've worked with Chris for like 9 years now. And, we all know everyone's strengths and weaknesses and work really well together. And we play off of that. And I think that can really translate into, those teams in your church, knowing your strengths and weaknesses, knowing the chemistry, how well people work together with each other. And then also, teaching people. If you're not learning, you're not doing it right. So, if you're willing to learn, you have the right mindset. And if you have someone that's willing to learn, make sure you're teaching them and training them up. And it'll instill confidence in people when you're trusting them with those different responsibilities and stuff like that. But you just got to make sure the training is there and just relying on that team.
That's good. Knowing your strengths and weaknesses, Toby. I think that could be a good nickname for us. I could be strength and you could be weakness.
What is my weakness, Blake?
Me. All right, yes. Travis, thank you for joining the Church Gear Podcast presented by House Right. Anything you want to plug? Anywhere you want to point people towards? Yeah.
So, I'm not on the road as much as I have been. I took a work. Let's see if I can get this sentence out. I took a staff role with a company here in Atlanta called Technical Elements, and it's been a great kind of transition to being home. I have a wonderful wife and 4 beautiful daughters, so I didn't want to tour, throughout the entire year. So I still do it occasionally, but wanted to have something a little more rooted at home that I can come back home most nights. And they put me out on the road as well, but it's not as much, and it's not 3 or 4 months at a time. So having that role has been really great, and we do a lot of good work. It's our bread and butter is like corporate AV, but we work with a lot of nonprofits and stuff like that as well. We have a really good partnership with Samaritan Spurs, which has been really fun to work with them and do stuff with a great organization like that. So that's been a fun journey. So if you guys ever need any AV needs, AVL needs in the Atlanta area, or just anywhere in the country, hit up Technical Elements. So based out of just north of Atlanta.
That's awesome. I couldn't help but think of the dad joke. So next year, Tommy Prophet comes to him and says, "Hey, you ready for this Birth of King show again?" And he says, "I'm sorry, I work with nonprofits now."
Oh, wow.
Oh my gosh.
Travis, we're going to send you out with that bad dad joke taste in your mouth, man. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, glad to be here with you guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope to see you back next week for more absurd stories, tech takeaways, and overall buffoonery here at the Church Gear Studios.
All right, Blake, what is your favorite NF song?
It's Hope, easily.
Yeah, and mine is Happy. And what do you do with your favorite songs on Spotify?
You play them and you run to them and then you share them to a friend.
That's right. And if you share the Church Gear podcast, I mean, I hate to say it, but it'll give you hope and it'll make you happy.